Hello, welcome to the video. Today I'm talking about diagonal minor pentatonic scales. This is a super useful thing. I'm using these finger shapes, these kind of licks all of the time. And this is a follow-up to a video I did recently on diagonal major pentatonic scales, and I thought it was worth giving minor pentatonic scales the same kind of thorough treatment. And this is despite the fact that minor and major pentatonics are very closely related, and you can use the same kind of fingerings, the same kind of licks and ideas with each. Personally, I think it's a really good idea to treat minor and major pentatonics as two separate things and not to have to go through that laborious kind of translation process from major to minor or minor to major, and that really slows you down when you're actually improvising or making music. So the basic idea is we're going to be moving horizontally or diagonally on the fretboard as opposed to staying in position. I think when you first learn your pentatonic scales, you learn them in position, and you might learn your 5 caged shapes eventually as well. All very useful things. You definitely want to know those, but as a kind of complement to that, I think it's good to be able to connect between those shapes in this kind of horizontal or diagonal way, and it really lends itself to nice flowing melodic playing, and I'm a big fan of this kind of approach. And that was just a little solo in the rock kind of style, demonstrating a few of the ideas that I'm going to be talking about right now. So minor pentatonic basics then, it's a 5-note scale. You start with your root note and it sounds like this. There are lots of ways you can lay this scale out on the guitar. I'm sure all of you will know this one. Commonly referred to as pattern 1, box 1 of the minor pentatonic scale, and you can do that in 4 other places on the fretboard as well. And then you've got 5 different pentatonic shapes or boxes which kind of put end to end. It sort of maps out the entire fretboard for this scale, and you can think of those 5 shapes as belonging to the 5 different patterns in the caged system. Now I'm not going to be going into that specifically in this video. If you would like to learn about those sort of caged shapes and that whole approach, it might well be worth you checking out my pair of soloing courses. Get a quick plug in for my courses. There's a beginner's course, and then there's one for more intermediate players where I kind of go for a kind of deep dive into all of that stuff. But the point of this video is to talk about this kind of horizontal way of playing pentatonic scales. So I'm going to do this to start with in the key of G or G minor. I'm going to start from this G root note here, and if you recall with the major pentatonic scales, the idea was we had 3 notes and then 2 notes. Just a kind of nice smooth way of getting from one end of the fretboard to the other. Now you could try that with the minor pentatonic scale. And it kind of works, but it doesn't fall that naturally under the fingers if you ask me. So what I would tend to do with the minor pentatonic scales is find the root note. So here's the root note, this G note at the 3rd fret on the low E string, but rather than fretting that with my 1st finger and kind of going up along the low E string, I would tend to play that note with my 3rd finger, and then I'm crossing over onto the next string to get the next note in the scale, which is this B flat note, the 1st fret on the A string, and then I've got my 3 notes on the A string, so 1st fret, 3rd and 5th fret, and then you can go over onto the D string, 3rd and 5th fret there. So you've got this. And if you like, you can go down 2 frets below the root and then come back and finish on the root. So this is a really nice series of notes. It falls very naturally under the fingers. You can play all of it was just with just the first finger and the third finger. It all seems to flow very smoothly, and that's a big deal. That's an important thing. If you're trying to make music with this stuff, you don't want anything that's even slightly awkward, or it starts to get in the way of the music. So far then, we've got this, just a simple 1 octave G minor pentatonic scale. And if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I'm very big on thinking about scales in 3 different ways primarily. So first of all, you've just got a pattern on the fretboard. So here we're starting on the 3rd finger. You've got this bunch of 3 notes and then another pair of notes over on the next string. So there's a finger pattern which you can kind of visualize on the fretboard. Then we've got the actual notes themselves. So with the G minor pentatonic scale, G is going to be our first note. Then we've got a B flat, a C, a D, and then an F before we get to another G an octave higher. So G, B flat, C, D, and F. Those are the notes involved here in the key of G minor. And then we've got intervals, and this is perhaps the most important, the most useful of the 3 ways of thinking about your scales. So we've got the root note here, then this B flat note is the minor 3rd, the flat 3rd, then the C, this is the 4th, and then we've got the 5th, which is D, the F is the flat 7, and then we're back onto the root again. So root, flat 3rd, 4, 5, flat 7. That's what's known as the interval formula of this scale, and the intervals are always going to stay the same. It doesn't matter what key you're in. If you're thinking in terms of the note names, yes, it's important to know your note names, but those are going to change. If you change key, then the actual notes in the scale will change. But if you're thinking in terms of intervals, that's always going to be the same. It's one of the reasons why that's very useful. Now let's continue building our diagonal scale then. If we've got this, which takes us to our G note here, we can do literally just the same thing again, but taking it further up the fretboard. So we can go, so same notes, same intervals, an octave higher. It's really the same finger pattern. So we've got our G note over onto the next string, bunch of 3 notes, and then 2 notes on the next string. It's the same finger shape as this. The only thing that's changed is when we go over onto the B string, we're just shifting up 1 fret just to compensate for the way that the guitar is tuned. And then we can continue up into another octave here. We can go, I'm just going to take it as far as there, then we run out of strings to continue that pattern. So we're just going to have the G, the B flat, the C, and then this D is going to be our highest note. And again, I'm going to emphasize the 3 ways that you can come at this scale. You've got the finger pattern on the fretboard, that nice kind of diagonal shape. You can kind of, almost imagine the dots kind of lighting up on the fretboard if you like. You've got the note names, so G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat, C, D, F, G, B flat, C, D. Then you've got the intervals, root, flat 3rd, 4th, 5th, flat 7, root, flat 3rd, 4th, 5th, flat 7, root, flat 3rd, 4th, and then this D here, this is the 5th, that's the highest note of our scale shape. That's our basic scale pattern, and the first thing to do is to get that under your fingers. And notice that we're moving up the fretboard by shifting. So I'm shifting here on my 3rd finger, here just moving my hand up to get the next note. That takes me into the next position, then continuing up the scale. Got another shift there, and then a shift there as well, and you can come down the same way. And you've got a choice. You can either shift on your 3rd finger or you can shift on your 1st finger, and I will do both of those things depending on the musical situation. But coming down this scale, I might shift on my 1st finger. So and then I'm coming down as far as this low F, but always finishing on that root note. So I'm hearing this as the G minor pentatonic scale. That G note is my home note. So that's the first drill that I'd like you to do. Take it slowly to start with. I would suggest you use alternate picking with this. You might like to get the metronome out just to make sure that you're playing it smoothly and evenly, and make sure that everything is rhythmically solid. Another thing to work on would be moving into the next position using slides. This is very common and adds to the smoothness of the sound. So instead of shifting, we would go, so I'm I'm picking this C note and then I'm just sliding up to the next note and not picking that note. You can slide again there and slide again there. You can slide coming back down as well. So that's another drill that you can try. So I'm sliding on my third finger on the way up, my first finger on the way down. You could reverse that if you wanted to. And one of the great things about this scale shape is it just lends itself so naturally to nice melodies, nice licks. So I'm just going to show you a few licks to get you started, then you can run with it and maybe come up with some ideas of your own. And one thing that's quite easy to do is just to play an idea in the first octave of this scale shape and then repeat it in the next octave and then repeat it in the next octave, and you're developing that idea and creating a nice flowing kind of a lick. So what if we had this idea? Very simple little melody, just starting on the root, coming up as far as the F, then back down again to the D, and then up and back to this G note, root note. So you could play the same thing an octave higher, and then we could do the same thing again, maybe just as high as that note there. That's when we run out of notes in this particular scale shape. So a lick might sound something like this. So just took our basic idea there, injected a little bit of rhythm. There's a little push on the and of 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and again here. And then at the end of the lick I just played in position. So in G minor pentatonic you've got pattern 3, shape 3 here. So at the end of the lick you can just resolve the phrase with some kind of idea in position. And it's why I say that these diagonal shapes are complementary to your caged positional shapes. You can use these diagonal shapes, but at any given moment in a solo or an improvisation you're free to just play in a more positional kind of a way. You can use the diagonal shapes to move up and down the fretboard, and then you can kind of dip into one or other of those caged shapes as well. It's all kind of part of the same thing for me. It's not like these are two different ways of thinking about the fretboard. It's all complementary. Let's have another lick, maybe a descending phrase, something like this. So just starting on the highest note of the scale, just working my way down really. So this one there's not really a pattern to it or a sequence to it. It's a little bit random. Sometimes I'm descending, occasionally I'm just changing direction and then continuing on my way down. Lots of different ways you can do this. So you can learn that lick as I just played it if you want to, or I'm sure you can come up with some variations of your own. And the licks don't always have to sound quite so scaly. You don't need to use the entire pattern in a single idea. You can actually combine these patterns with your standard kind of blues or rock ideas. So maybe something like this. So there I've just got a fairly standard blues lick. And just coming down the scale, but instead of going and using my pinky to play the flat third there, I'm coming down to play the flat third there. So whichever way you do it, it's going to be the same notes, but for me this is much more flowing to play the flat third down there. It's just a little bit awkward to use your pinky there, or even to stretch with your third finger there. Yeah, of course you can do it, but it's just a little bit smoother. It feels more natural under the fingers to come down here. The scale that we've been working with up till now has got the root note on the low E string. You can do the same thing with the root on the 5th string, and this is another essential diagonal minor pentatonic scale fingering, I think. So let's do this starting from a C root note, so C minor pentatonic. Really it's exactly the same idea. We've got a C note here at the 3rd fret on the 5th string, and we're going to move up diagonally through the scale in exactly the same way. That's the first little bit of the scale. So the root note, once again, underneath the 3rd finger, we're reaching back for our flat 3rd. We've got our slide, so it's 1 note and then a group of 3 notes over onto the next string and a pair of notes. That's the first bit. And then we can do the same thing in the next octave. It's the same finger shape, we've just got that B string compensation, just shifting up 1 fret. And I'm just going to throw in 1 extra note here as well, this E flat note at the 11th fret on the top string. So that's our 5th string root fingering for this scale. And because we're now starting from a C root note, the note names have now changed. We've got C, E flat, F, G and B flat. Those are the notes in the C minor pentatonic scale. But as we've seen, the finger shape is more or less the same, and the intervals are exactly the same. So once you've got your root note, you've got your flat 3rd, just reaching back from the root note. You've got the 4th and the 5th, and then you've got the flat 7 here, which is 2 frets below the root note. So you can learn that scale, practice that scale in exactly the same way. So starting off, just drilling that shape up and down, just picking all of the notes and with shifts to get you into the next position. This scale, because we've got the root note on the 5th string, you've actually got a few notes that you can fill in down below the root. So you've got your flat 7 here, then you can come over onto the 6th string at the 3rd fret here, and the 1st fret you've got a G and an F. So this is the 5th, and then this is the 4th down below the root. But of course, I'm going to come back up again, and I'm going to end on that root note. I really want to hear that note as the home note. So that's how I would drill this scale. You can do the same thing with slides. And I've got a couple of licks for you using this scale fingering, and the first one goes like this. So this one is based on that idea of taking a phrase in 1 octave and then shifting it up to the next octave, so that the basic phrase is this. So starting on the flat 3rd and going back to the root, and then up the scale, and then we can do the same thing here, and then sliding up to the highest note in the scale, and then I'm just playing a little bit of a bluesy idea in position. So this scale ends up in pattern 1, the traditional pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale. So C minor pentatonic here. So that's how I'm ending the lick. Mostly this lick is just 8th notes, but there is that little rhythmic push in the middle, just emphasizing the and of 4. So it's 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's have another lick, maybe a descending idea in this finger pattern as well. So little bluesy idea, starting on the highest note of the scale pattern, giving that a bend, and then just coming down with 1st finger slides here. So 2 1st finger slides, and then a triplet, and ending on the root note. So giving that one a bit of swing as well, it's kind of a bluesy phrase. I would prioritise working on those 2 scale fingerings to start with, just making some music with those. But if you want to take things a little bit further, you could try adding in some extra notes. I quite like to think of my pentatonic scales as being these frameworks, and then I can include some extra notes if I want a bit of extra colour. So obvious thing to do would be to include the flat fifth, and then you will have the blues scale, which sounds like this. So if you've got that minor pentatonic framework, it's actually quite easy to find the flat 5, particularly if you're already thinking in terms of intervals. The flat fifth is going to live in between the 4th and the 5th. So we would have the root, flat 3rd, 4th, there's the flat 5th, and there's the 5th. So we've got this chromatic run of 3 notes. Now you can just throw that in the other octaves as well. You want to think about fingering here. I generally like to have that run of 3 notes under the 1st, 2nd and 3rd fingers, rather than playing all of those notes with one finger. So here I'm shifting with my 1st finger, and then I've got my fingers free to play the flat 5th and the 5th. And the same thing here and here. So I'm shifting early on my 1st finger, and I think I would do the same thing on the way down as well. So that is our G blues scale, and why not have a blues scale lick, maybe something like this. So a nice kind of flowing legato sounding blues scale lick. I'm starting here on the flat 5th, so the 9th fret on the top string. I've got a series of hammer-ons and pull-offs, and then sliding down. So that's the basic kind of cell of this lick, if you like. And then we do the same thing from here. And the same thing again. Quite a shredding little lick though. We don't have enough shred on this channel. Maybe we should have some more shredding, or maybe not. I'm not quite sure about that. Maybe you could let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more shredding on this channel. So I got distracted. Where was I? Back to the main thrust of this tutorial. We could do the same thing with the 5th string root version of this scale. So the C blues scale would look like this. It works in exactly the same way. I'm just filling in that gap between the 4th and the 5th with our flat 5th. So here as well. You can have that low flat 5th down below our root note as well. Falls really naturally underneath the fingers, and it lends itself to lots of nice licks and phrases. So if I just give you an example lick with the C blues scale, we could have something like this. So a little kind of swinging bluesy phrase there, and then up the scale. And again this little blues scale run of notes, and ending on the flat 3rd, which I'm just bending slightly sharp. So a few things there to play around with. Another note that's nice to add into the minor pentatonic scale is the major 6. So you've got this sort of, adding in that E note if you're playing a G minor pentatonic scale, and that gives a really nice flavour. It works really well in a blues context, so that's something else that you might like to play around with. The gear that I'm using today, guitar is my Trent Model 1, amp is Fender Princeton, and I got a couple of pedals down here, pedals which I don't think I've used before in my videos. The first of these pedals is an overdrive pedal. This was sent to me recently by a friend. It's a DIY pedal which I believe is based on the circuit from the Greer amps Light Speed, which is a kind of a bit of a modern classic natural sounding transparent overdrive pedal. So that one sounds like this. This is the sound of the guitar just going into a clean Princeton, and then click on the pedal. So yeah, like the sound of that a lot. I need to play around with it a little bit more, but can definitely see myself using that some more in future videos. Then the other pedal I've got down here is something called a Golden Fleece, which I think is by a company called Mythos Pedals, and I think this is again, technically it's an overdrive pedal. It's got quite a fuzzy sound to it though, so that sounds like this. And then what I was doing at the start of this video, I had both of those pedals on at the same time. It's something I quite often like to do for lead guitar tone. So I've got the Golden Fleece going into the DIY Light Speed, and that sounds like this. That's it for this video. Hope you found it fun. Hope you found it useful. If you would like a tab, of course, that's going to be up on the Patreon page. I'm going to tab out all of the examples in this video. I'm also going to write out the little improvisation that I played right at the top. And if you'd like the backing track, that's going to be up there too. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you next time.